They say you only make one good first impression, and I suck at that. So we're just going to get right into it. Welcome on into the Overtime Drive, a brand new show found here on SEC Unfiltered. He's Dave Shumate. I'm pointing it the wrong way, so I'm going to switch that real fast. He's Dave Shumate. I'm Cole Thompson, and we are back in action. If you like the SEC Sunday Fun Day show, if you like any of the previews, if you like the stuff that we do during the regular season, you'll probably enjoy this type of content as well, because Dave and I decided, you know what? Let's put together a show. So make sure that you go ahead and hit the like button, the ring notification, and of course, subscribe to the channel. Tell your friends, your family, your mortal enemies, best of bros, really anybody that enjoys college football, college basketball, SEC conversations, and all of that good shit. Make sure that you go ahead and like the video. Make sure that also you're following us on the social channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at SEC Unfiltered. Follow Dave at Dave Shumate SEC, me at Mr. Cole Thompson, and check out all of our great work found at secunfiltered.com. This episode is fueled by FANDUEL. Visit FANDUEL.com/SECU to join today and get started with $150 in bonus bets when you play your first $5 bet. So sign up today, join in the madness, win that bet. You'll get $150 in bonus bets simply by joining in the madness today. Sign up at FANDUEL.com/SECU. Schuster, it's been a minute since we've done a video together. How the hell are you?
Bear, it's an honor. And for the people who don't know, Cole the Bear Thompson originated from polar bear. So just so we know the origin of it, that's where bear comes from for our guy Cole Thompson. I had to step away for a minute. But it's awesome, guys. I'm fired up to present this show to you, the Overtime Drive. We just wanted a full-time, just duo SEC show going on. So I'm fired up to be doing it with our guy Cole Thompson. Bear ready to get rocking and rolling, man. We got a lot to cover tonight.
So here's the deal. What is this show? Why are we doing this show? What's the reason for this show? We want to talk college football. You need college football. We want to do more content for you. So naturally, we're going to do two shows. Here's how the premise of the show is going to work. We're going to do a live show twice a week, Mondays and Thursdays. Mondays during the off season, we have content planned. We got stuff that we're going to be working out. We're going to be exercising some new things. We're going to be testing out some stuff that we really like, things that we're going to do in one-off videos, just to give you more content for your liking. Now, Thursdays, we're doing Q&A. We're going to do a mailbag. So after this show, make sure that you're following Dave Shumate and I live on Twitter, at Mr. Cole Thompson, at Dave Shumate SEC, at SEC Unfiltered. We're going to drop a link where you ask your mailbag questions. And on Thursday, we're going to come back in. If you do a live stream, if you want to join the live stream, if you want to join the content section, super chats cut the line. So automatically, we're going to jump on in. If you give us money, we're going to answer your question live on air, unscripted, unprepared, whatever you want to know. Doesn't have to be about college football. Doesn't have to be about college basketball. Could be about our lives, what we're eating for dinner. What does Dave like? What do I hate? What pisses Dave off about me? What pisses me off about him? What's the best snacks that we get on road trips? Whatever you like, that is Thursday show. So Monday, jam-packed show, filled with what we have already got planned. What Thursday show, every single day, Q&A, mailbag questions, whatever you want. This is an interactive show for you, the people. We've been working on this for several weeks. This is the best course of action. So Dave and I are not going to waste much time, as we're going to start every single show. SEC headlines, things that have been happening around the league that we haven't been able to catch up on. Dave, what you got in the docket?
We're going around the SEC, folks, quick and thorough, quickly leading off on the hardwood since we are in the middle of college basketball season. 2 weeks left of the regular season. Darion Reed, Natty says today, still day-to-day with a hamstring injury, one of their best defenders. The Tide could definitely use him down the stretch. Doesn't sound like he's out for the season, just game to game, so it's somewhat good news if you're an Alabama fan. Lamont Butler, Jackson Robinson for Kentucky. Still day-to-day. Hearing you'll get maybe Lamont Butler back this weekend against Auburn. Jackson Robinson with that wrist injury, probably not till senior night against LSU up here. So, again, I think they'll be out against Oklahoma this week. Florida, going to the football field. Florida hires Darren Wilson to coach the corners at Florida. Billy Napier hired him to coach it at Florida. Coming over from Arkansas, played at Southern Miss. He'd been on Billy Napier's staff before as an analyst at Florida, so pretty good hire there. Across the board for Florida, getting a little younger there. Texas hires Dwayne Akina, corners coach, who replaces Terry Joseph, who's went off to join, I think, passing game coordinator for the Saints. And then Akina had been there for years. Well, I looked at 2001 to 13, I think, with Mac Brown. So he'd been there for a while, the whole Mac Brown era. He's very familiar with the 40 acres. And then we will get to this video in a quick moment to wrap up around the SEC, but quickly, Texas A&M moving to the baseball field real fast. A&M third baseman Gavin Grohovac out for the season with a shoulder injury. Tough break for the Aggies, preseason number 1 favorite to win the SEC right now, but tough early injury season there.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah.
That sucks, honestly, and that sucks that happened so early on in the year. I guess the good part is you get to see what you have left at the position. They got like a transfer coming on in, who like the freshman, Wyatt Hensler's gonna get some reps there, so you feel good about the position. But losing a guy like Rehovic, SEC freshman of the year, definitely a blow. What about the SEC sound of the day? I guess it would be at this point.
Let's pull it up there. Let's let the people. Oh, there it is.
What do these guys have in common?
Jesus.
Speak up. Heisman. It's a good answer. That's actually true. They're definitely quarterbacks. That's the most elementary thing. Heisman, quarterbacks, champions. He ain't champion. Champion of what? Champion of fireball. All right. I'm gonna go here for you. There's Heisman, right? They all had great days versus our defenses. Okay, they both, all 4 of them went off on us in some way, shape, or form. Okay, but the Heisman. What do these guys have in common?
A&M fans are gonna hate
Speak
that.
up.
They are.
Heisman.
They're gonna hate that so much.
It's actually.
What do you think about that?
I'll be honest. I mean, if you took away just the fireball, champion of fireball, I don't think it's terrible. Honestly, I mean, his main point. I mean, it wasn't like he was sitting there just pounding. He just threw the side joke in there and just talked about what Cam Newton, Joe Burrow, Johnny Manziel, and
Johnny Manziel and Bryce Young.
And Bryce Young. His main thing is they all had big days against them, either at Alabama or Georgia against that defense. So his point. I mean, somebody said champion, someone said quarterback. He called him out for the very elementary level statement. I don't know. I don't think I think he was just trying to be a little humorous. I didn't take too much from it. Again, it's a little bit of a shot at Johnny. He had 2 big games against them, and he's not wrong. I mean, I just don't think it's that big of a deal.
Why? What does it matter? Like, okay, what? Here, let's go with another one. Everyone else made it to the NFL and was a stud. The other one wasn't. Like, I mean, we could just do that. Like, we can go with lower blows. Guys were all first-round picks and made it longer than 3 years. You could take another shot. Champion of what? Fireball. Everyone knows it. Johnny embraces it. He knows what he was when he was in college. He was a party animal, and guess what? He also kicked the crap out of Alabama. He kicked the crap out of Georgia. He beat South Carolina. He led his team to an 11-2 finish, year 1 in the SEC, won a Heisman Trophy, did everything that you could ever imagine for a redshirt freshman. I don't think he cares at this point. He did his job, and he was awesome at what he did. So if you have a complaint about it, get over it. It's not that big of a deal. Johnny knows who he is as a player. Johnny knows what he's going to be for the longest time in college football lore. He's going to be a Hall of Famer, and he's going to be forever remembered by the 12th man in a positive light. So just let it roll off your shoulders. It's not that big of a deal that he's a champion of what? Fireball. And guess what? Johnny could probably outdrink Kirby Smart in a fireball chugging contest. So he is the champion of fireball when it comes to that standpoint. I think so.
Fireball, man. Don't get me started with that.
Dude, it's the most disgusting alcohol that I have ever had in my entire life.
Dude, it is. And I'm a cinnamon guy. I actually like cinnamon.
Oh, you're the worst. You're terrible.
Dude, I do like cinnamon stuff. It's just like you have one bad experience with something, you can't ever go back to it. And I smell. It's affected me a little bit with cinnamon as well. Just like I get that smell, I'm like, fireball, man. The Kirby's not wrong, though. I would not champion Fireball.
Fireball at this point, I would much rather drink gasoline. I would. I can't stomach Fireball shots. It's like, you know when people were like, oh, Rumplemint is the one that makes your stomach churn? No, I would rather.
It's like black licorice, people say.
Yeah, I don't even know what it tastes like. It tastes like a bad night and a terrible hangover the next morning. That's what it feels like to me. But I don't know. I'd much rather drink Rumplemint. I'd chug a gallon of Rumplemint before I would have another shot of Fireball. All right. Dave decided, and I decided, that Chris Phillips is not the only person that's allowed to have an opinion on SEC football head coaches. He did not ask for our opinions when he came out with his list of the SEC coaching rankings. So we're going to kickstart the show tonight with our head coaching rankings. Now, there are some certain criteria that we have. That way we made it pretty fair. The first one is overall record. I don't care what school you're at. I don't care where you've been. I don't care how long you've been in the SEC. Your record has to mean something. What do you show over your tenure throughout the world of college football that guarantees why you should belong in this category? Number 2, likability at current school. Are you on the hot seat? Are you facing pressure to live up to expectations in 2025? Have you met the standard of what your fan base wants? Number 3, stability with the program. How well are you recruiting? Are you retaining talent? Are you putting out NFL caliber players? Are you winning in the transfer portal? Are you making sure that players aren't leaving in the transfer portal to go to another SEC school? Number 4, signature moments. What's your record against top 25 teams? Have you gone to the college football playoff? Have you beaten Nick Saban? Like, that's a pretty big thing that people like at this point. And number 5, likability between us. No, not in terms of likability at your school, likability with your fan base, likability with your locker room. Do Dave and I like you? Because there's coaches that I don't like. There's coaches that Dave doesn't like. And guess what? You're going to lose some numbers because of that, because we just personally can't stomach you. So, Dave, do you want to start this off or do you want me to? Because it really doesn't matter. We both have 16.
Hey, I'll be the leadoff man. I'll take it for
Let's
us.
go.
We'll get on base. I'm on base. We're leading 16 through 1, right?
Yeah, we already know who number 1 is, and we both know who number 16 is. So let's just not.
16. He may have some Mississippi State fans argue with it, but I think me and you are going to agree here. Jeff Levy. Again, next year, big year for him. Just right now, I mean, who are you putting behind him? Or I should say, who are you putting him in front of? I mean, again, this year, kind of a wash. You would like to get to conference win. There's no sugarcoating it. It was a bad first year, but get Blake Shapen back. Next year's a big year. I think you got to go get 5-6 wins. And I think that'll be even tough. But you're right. Right now, first year being a head coach, about to get his second year in his belt. I mean, he's 16th.
Number 1, you lost to a MAC team. That's the only thing that I qualify you for at this point. You lost to a MAC team at home. Like the Arizona State game, that's one that I could say probably sours some fans out in the SEC. They went to the college football playoff. You lost to a MAC team that didn't even go to its conference championship. And I get it. You lost your starting quarterback. I understand your defense sucked, but I like some of the pieces that were added in this offseason. Jeff Levy went 0-8 in year 1. There's not a big track record that we have. All these other coaches outside of Brent Venables, when they came to the SEC, and I guess you could throw Sam Pittman in here, they had coaching experience elsewhere, so they have a little bit longer leash when it comes to their track record as head coaches. So he did a good job portaling in talent. He lost a lot of talent, but a lot of the talent wasn't his to begin with. So I think that it's a wait and see with him. Being 16, if you're Jeff Levy, not a negative. 15, maybe a little bit negative at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, some of the adjustments. It's like Scattaboo and them defensively. And again, I know he's an offensive guy, but that would concern me. Moving to 15, I'm going to put Sammy Pittman there. A little bit losing the fire a little bit. I think kind of getting fat and happy. No offense. It's not like a fat. It's just the saying, fat and happy. Some may think he's a little overrated, whatever. But I think kind of just getting comfortable, trying to appease the 100-year chicks of the world and just kind of collecting a check at this point. So I'm moving you down. I think you started off hot out of the gate in 2020. 2021, again, you were a highly ranked team with KJ Jefferson, and it feels like really since like the end of the 21 season, the Hogs have kind of gone down. I mean, they had flashes in 22, 23 of playing teams close, and that's kind of what it's been with Sam Pittman and them. Like, they've been competitive. They've won 6-7 games. They've gotten big wins over programs that are, for whatever reason, highly touted, like Texas Tech, and those guys haven't done anything, but they get benefit of the doubt. But Sam and them have beaten them, but I just think it's kind of stagnant. The Arkansas fans, and I agree with them, it's kind of like, where are we? It's a football program right now. It's like, we're not bad, but we could probably be a little better. But I think, yeah, you're right. I think Sam's right now 15. I think that burner's low right now. I don't know how much more he's got left in him.
Here's my thing with him at 15. I said that retaining talent is such a big deal. Look at how much they've lost in the portal the last few years. I mean, your star tight end, Luke Haas, is now at Ole Miss. Patrick Kudus is now at Ole Miss. Multiple other players have gone to other SEC programs, which means you are losing talent to schools in your own conference. That's a negative to me. And the big thing is that he's going to get a win against a top 25 team. It's going to happen. Happened last year with the Tennessee game. Could happen against Texas A&M this year now that the game's in Fayetteville. Could happen against Notre Dame. Could happen against LSU. Who's to say? He always gets a top 25 win, and then he loses a game that he probably shouldn't. The Oklahoma State game, in my opinion, one of the biggest blunders that I had this year. Oklahoma State was not a good team. They had zero help at quarterback, and yet they found ways to shoot themselves in the foot. They're not progressing. They're regressing. And at some point, you got to ask yourself, if you are Arkansas, what are your realistic goals? What do you want to be as a program? Do you want to be a 6-6 going to a bowl game every single year type of team? Do you want to be one that competes for a top 25 finish, maybe a dark horse every 5 or 6 seasons in the college football playoff? Or do you just want to be a team that somehow you're okay with 4-8 and all your resources and all your money and all the allocations and all the NIL funds goes to college baseball, goes to college basketball, goes to women's basketball, goes to gymnastics, goes to other sports. And then football's just like, yeah, we got a stadium that has Tyson on the field. Cool. That's Sam Pittman for me. He's a good dude, but when I have to start a conversation off with you're a good dude, kind of shows why you are number 15 in the pecking order. Who you got at 14?
Going to BV, old Brent Venables, I think one of the best defensive coordinators the sport's seen in about 2 decades, even going back to his, a little longer than that too, going back to his Oklahoma original days, DC, obviously at Clemson, now at Oklahoma. Big year for BV coming up. Again, I don't really know who you could have put him in front of, similar to Jeff Lebby being last. I just don't know who you could put in front of him, what he's done so far, but massive year for him coming up. Hired Ben Arbuckle, bringing in Mateer to be the quarterback. Got to get something going offensively. The defense hasn't been the problem, but you're not just over the defense now. You're the head football coach. It's all got to be operating in fine fashion down in Norman. So next year's a big one for him. 14th, Brent Venables. Again, big year for Brent. Big year.
So this is the first time we disagree with somebody. I like that. I'm glad that we do. 14 for me. I love you, Clark Lee, but you've only had one good year to kind of go off of. You're at 14. I think that we're overhyping Clark Lee just a smidge. Now, don't get me wrong. Had the biggest win in program history, beating number 1 Alabama. You also beat Auburn. You own the state. Like, Kay Ivey, move on over. Judge Governor is Diego Pavia. Head Governor, Clark Lee. You went to a bowl game. You closed out your year with a win against a team that went to 8 overtimes against Georgia. That eventually won the SEC. You retained a lot of talent this year. But keep in mind, you struggled in year 1 in the SEC. You struggled in year 2 in the SEC. There were some that said you were on the hot seat going into this year. I wasn't one of them. I think I know what the realistic expectations are at a place like Vanderbilt. But still, you hadn't had a winning season since getting there. That's kind of the thing that I say that is different for you compared to everybody else in the SEC, is that everyone can say, I've had a winning season. This is your first one. Even BV can say he had a winning season, beat Texas in the Red River Shootout, something that Clark Lee can't. Now, if he continues the trajectory that he's on, continues to show that he's recruiting at a high level, he's retaining talent, Vanderbilt's becoming a transfer portal destination, I'm not saying you got to go to the college football playoff. 8-4, 7-5 every year, going to a decent bowl game, having a chance to retain talent, that's a win in my book. Massive win for me. I got him at 14. I think he can rise up this list by the end of next year. But for this year, playing it safe. One winning season.
Heading to 13, I'm going to go Hugh Freeze here. I'm going to go Hugh. I think he's underachieved significantly so far in Auburn in 2 years. An overall losing record. Hasn't had a winning record in either season. 6-7, 5-7 last year. Just like Brent Venables, massive year. Those two, throw in Sam Pittman, 1A, 1B, 1C, big year. And honestly, I'd probably put Sam Pittman at third below these two guys. That's how big of a 2025 campaign Hugh Freeze has to have. Just been a little bumpy in the road. You hear his players don't really like him. The quarterbacks haven't liked him, kind of throwing people under the bus during the season. I think there's too much talent being accumulated on this team now. Obviously you got Cam Coleman. They brought in the Singleton kid from Georgia Tech. They have weapons on the outside. The defense under DJ Durkin, they gave him the big contract extension so he didn't go to Ohio State. Ryan Day wanted him. He went to Auburn, wanted to stay, and they matched that. So I think retaining DJ Durkin's big. I think Auburn's going to be one of the more improved teams in the country. Again, it's not going to take much more to be improved than 5 wins. So it's all contextual. But I definitely think they're going to potentially – I think they're going to be in that 8-9 range this year if I had to say right now. But I think as of this moment, I'm not looking at the Ole Miss stuff. That was a different era of college football. I'm grading him off what he's done at Auburn so far. Recruiting's been phenomenal, but the on-the-field results have been completely underwhelming. And I don't even know the people with the brightest orange and blue glasses could disagree. Because, we're not talking about, man, they just can't get to Atlanta. They can't compete for the SEC. We're talking about having winning records and you put in a back-to-back performance. Very underachieving. And the way it's kind of gone down from a media standpoint hasn't been great either. So I think Hugh's initial start at Auburn, not off to a great start, but I do think they'll be better this year.
Hugh Freeze, number 13. Here's the main reason. I don't believe in you. That's it. A lot of people can come up with better reasons. You went 6-7 last year. You put all your eggs in the Peyton Thorne basket. And the problem is, Dave, they weren't a bad team last year. If you go take out the turnovers in the game against Oklahoma, the turnovers in the game against Cal, the turnovers in the game against Arkansas, they win all 3. They end up going to a bowl game. They have a shot to finish off the year 9-4. They're competitive in games against A&M. They're competitive in the even Iron Bowl now with what's it called? With Kay and the board down there. I'm starting to believe that I don't think Hugh Freeze can get the job done. And I understand there's a lot of things that go into it. Like, he played a lot of freshmen that were not ready to start at most SEC schools last year. I understand there's some running backs that you have to go turn to, but the play calling also was abysmal at times. You had a 1,000-yard runner in a guy in Jarquez Hunter, and much like a guy the year prior in Brian Harsin, who had Tank Bigsby, didn't want to use the running back room. You don't utilize your best players. And I understand you're bringing in the right talent. You're recruiting at a high-end level. You're punching out names left and right that are going to eventually find their way to the NFL. I get all that. But at some point, you can buy all the ingredients and still make a crappy recipe out of it. That's how I feel about Hugh Freeze right now. I don't think that he's the right guy for the job. You're laying off the laurels of beating Nick Saban back-to-back years. That's really your selling point in the SEC, that your first year, you come to the conference after being at Liberty. You nearly get the win against Alabama, but you also lose to New Mexico State. I don't care what anybody says. You should never, ever, ever lose to a team at the Conference USA level in the SEC. Quarterback or not, I don't care.
The Hugh Freeze era has been off the trail really since their road win in Arkansas back in 23. That was really the last time that you kind of like, that's probably his best win since he's been at Auburn, honestly. And that wasn't even a great Arkansas team, but lost to New Mexico State, Bama, and then Maryland in the bowl game the next 2 weeks. So since then, I agree. I don't really know how he could be higher. I mean, unless you're one of
you guys. It may be weird, but I think he's on the hottest seat personally. I personally do. Just what the expectation should be in Auburn.
Oh,
I think he's on a hotter seat than most people give him.
Again, I think if he gets 7, I think he's back. Again,
yeah,
I think he may have some people roster, but you got to get to 5 or 6. And again, they should. Let's be honest too, Bear. It's not like the schedule's been difficult since he's been there. They had a home and home with Cal that he split, and then they pick up Baylor this year. I mean, it's not like they've been. No offense to Vandy and them. They've had Vandy every year he's been on the schedule. Granted, Vanderbilt was a good team.
Yeah, and Vanderbilt beat them this past year with guess who? Baba Yaga, a quarterback that he could have utilized to his advantage that would have fit his system extremely well. That's the other thing that's really frustrating.
For Mark, coming in number 12 for me, the head man at Kentucky, Mark Stoops. Man, what kind of a fall from grace, maybe wrong term, but it's what initially comes to my mind here. I mean, built the Kentucky program into what we know now. It's kind of his own standards held against him at this point. But I think it was started off with a rocky road a little bit. Mitch Barnhart, the AD, obviously him and Cal didn't get along. Obviously that's gone now. But I don't know, it feels like Stoops a little bit 1 foot in, 1 foot out the door. His coaches shows during the week or usually have some passive aggressive comments. I don't know. It just feels like whenever he can, he will leave, but I don't see the guy for retiring from stuff I've heard from a personal deal. I don't think the finances are as well as people would think. So when it's been in that, so I think he needs to keep coaching unless Kirk Ferentz here retires and he goes to Iowa. I don't know. I just think 12 right now. They have underachieved significantly the last 3 years. I mean, really since the 21 season, Kentucky has been down the you-know-what, really. It's either the offensive line, quarterback play is not getting going. I mean, even Will Levis's last year, even to Devin Leary, it's just nothing has worked. And I don't think this year, honestly, they may be the worst team in the league this year going into the year. And I'm not giving predictions yet, but just from talking to people around them, I mean, Zach Calzada is the quarterback. It's going to go – I'm not a big fan. I don't like the trajectory of this Kentucky program, even though tip of the cap to Mark Stoops. I mean, he essentially is Kentucky football right now, but it's been going downhill the last 3 years, in my opinion, Bear. But he comes in at 12 for me.
Brent Venables, number 12 for me. Guess what? You beat Hugh Freeze head-to-head. So that's the difference maker in this one. First year in the SEC, you get a win over Hugh Freeze. Here is his record since being named the head coach in placement of Lincoln Riley. 6-7, 10-3, 6-7. So which is it? Because if this year is critical, I love the hire of Ben Arbuckle. I love the addition of John Mateer. The fact that you have the same quarterback and OC coming from the program before is just music to my ears. It is a daunting schedule. It is a brutal schedule. You look as soon as they head to Dallas to play in the Red River Shootout and what comes up after, like realistic expectations should be 8-4. They should be 8-4 at best. I like the defense. I still think the offensive line is going to get better. You have a full healthy season of Deion Burks. That's a massive win. But I don't know what to expect from him just yet. I still have high hopes because from a defensive standpoint, here's the bottom line. If I get to pick my defensive coordinator of any of the head coaches in the SEC minus Kirby Smart, I'm picking Brent Venables. I know he's going to get that side of the football fixed because he did the last 2 years. And he's shown you that he knows how to recruit the right amount of talent. I think at year one in the SEC was a struggle. Terrible offensive line, terrible offensive communication. They fired their offensive coordinator. It was very clear that Seth Luttrell was not the right guy for the job. So I'm not worried about a guy like Brent Venables just yet. He's not proven, so that's why he's at number 12. And I give a little bit more respect to Mark Stoops because of what he has done. But still, he has gotten you to a 10-win season. Guess who hasn't gotten you to a 10-win season in the SEC since 2015? Hugh Freeze. So, sorry. I'm going to put you a little bit ahead.
11. I'm going to go Billy Napier. Again, I think Napier's system works. It just has to – the admin's got to buy in. You got to give him 4 to 5 years, and I don't think a lot of teams have patience with that. Florida's shown. I give them a round of applause for being patient. I think a lot of athletics departments are taking that approach, cutting back budgets. Heck, there's people I've talked to in SEC programs. They're not getting their bowl bonus this year. They've just cut that back. They're cutting rolls. Again, with all this $20 million revenue coming in, folks, that's going to be a thing. So I think that's a big reason why Billy Napier got retained, because it wasn't bleeding out. Sorry for being gruesome there, but it's just, if it's not bleeding out, people were like, let's just see. We don't know all the rules that are coming up anyways. Let's play it by ear. Big year for Billy too. I mean, you got your franchise guy, DJ Lagway, coming back. I think you got to go win 8 games, 8-9 games if you're Billy Napier. It's a hey, we know it's not bad, but let's go get to the Florida level that we were accustomed to seeing over the last 3 decades. You're probably not going to get to that this year, but let's go get 8-9 wins. Let's go beat one of our big rivals like Tennessee at home this year. Maybe go get Georgia. I think it's just time to take that next step heading in year 4. Other than that, phenomenal finish across the board there. That's why I'd give him a little more juice heading into the 25 season over a couple of these other guys. But I'm going to have old Billy coming in 11.
I got Stoops at 11. Here's the reason why. He's the winningest coach in program history. Like, that has to mean something. He still is, in my opinion, the best coach that has ever walked through the doors in Lexington. He has 2 10-win seasons at a place that is known for basketball. He's been able to recruit talent, punch out first-round defensive talent. He's been able to retain talent from going into the transfer portal. At one point, going to a bowl game was the bare minimum, and like that was a win in itself. And then it became the expectations. I mean, there were people last year who thought with the players that they added on in, with Brock Vandergrift coming in at quarterback, veteran defensive line, they were going to be a player for a 9-win season. And again, foolish of me to be one of those to believe, well, being a dark horse is not that far-fetched. Brock Vandergrift wasn't the answer. I had questions when it came to Bush Hamden. The big blue wall sucked last year. And I do agree with you that when you have that type of contract at a school like Kentucky, number one, it's one of the best contracts that have ever existed in college athletics. And number two, I think the other thing is that you got to start living up to the role, and I don't think he has. He still is the winningest program coach in school history. That has to mean something. And if you get to 6-6 with what you brought in via the portal this year, what you have lost in the portal, how bad your quarterback play is, with some of the games that you have to go up against, like Ole Miss in week 2 that's going to be foaming at the mouth for an opportunity to send belt to ass. Like, to me, that says something about Stoops. I don't think that he's a great coach. I don't think that he's one of the elite coaches or even an A-plus coach in the SEC anymore. But he still deserves his flowers for what he has accomplished during his over decade-long run in Lexington.
Number 10, I'm going to go Clark Lee. You already named him. I'm going to be short and sweet with him. I just think the guy's a really good football coach. I think he built up some momentum last year, got the brand out there. I think the alum is around him now. Again, I think they followed up with another bowl-type season. He's got a lot of those key pieces back, obviously starting with Diego Pavia. I know he's really close with the Georgia staff. From talking to people on Georgia staff, they were sharing a lot of game plans last year because the common denominator was Will Muschamp would go to all Vanderbilt's games because his son was on the team. And I think there was a lot of sharing notes between common opponents from a defensive standpoint. And there's a lot of respect there between Kirby Smart, Glenn Schumann, Chidera Uzo-Doribe, and Clark, and obviously Will Muschamp and Clark Lee and that staff. I like the momentum I'm hearing from Clark Lee and them. Young coach, passionate. I give him a tip of the cap, man. Like, goes in, hires, I think, one of the kind of changed the outcome of college football a little bit, or at least to some extent, with hiring Tim Beck and bringing essentially over the New Mexico State offense with Diego Pavia. And then he had to make tough decisions to get rid of coordinators, promoted himself, or took over the job at defensive coordinator and said, hey, if nobody else can get it done, I'm going to roll with myself. So he bet on himself. I think last year was massive. I don't know if they're going to go to a bowl game every year, but Vanderbilt is going to be a competitive squad, and Clark Lee is a hell of a defensive mind. I may be a little high on him, and I think that's fair, but I like him at 10.
10 for me, Mike Elko. Here's the reason why. The other coach that I'm going to name at 9, and they're like in the same tier. He's won a conference championship at a previous school. And the other thing is that there was buy-in, in my opinion, on the defensive side of the football last year. How many explosive plays were allowed when you're a defensive coach? That's inexcusable, especially when you're at a place like Texas A&M that brings in the right talent, especially at a place like Texas A&M that you know the lay of the land on how to recruit, especially like Texas A&M that should never be finishing in the bottom half of the SEC rankings in pass coverage. I don't mind the offense. I think the offense is going to take a massive step forward this year. I like what you have in Le'Veon Moss. I like what you have in Ruben Owens. You go and you portal in the right players every single offseason. Last year was Nick Scorton. This year it's Casey Concepcion. I think that Mike Elko, for what he's going to accomplish out there, for understanding what are the expectations in a place like College Station, he's good. But I thought it was inexcusable the way that Marcel Reed leads you back to a win over USC for your defense, an area that you pride yourself on, to give up those explosive plays and allow USC to come away with the win. I thought it was inexcusable the way that you just didn't show up in the second half against South Carolina, how you didn't show up in the second half against Auburn. And so it knocks him down a little bit. I still think he's the right guy for the job. But when you look at what his major accomplishments are, I'm still looking at what he did at Duke, and he's living off of that just for right now. Doesn't mean he can't climb up this list. Think that next year they could be a 10-win team. I'm not ready to go put A&M on that pecking order, but it's not going to surprise me if A&M, with the resources that they have the right coach. But I have not seen enough in year one to be able to say, yep, Mike Elko better than all these other guys.
Yeah, 9th for me is just who you're talking about there. Mike Elko. Again, following, Clark Lee, Mike Elko is Clark Lee's mentor going back to the Wake Forest days. So 2 guys from that perspective. Barry, you hit on some of the Mike Elko stuff. I think long-term is hiring good people and trusting them is going to be Mike Elko's biggest issue. He's a control freak, have worked with him for a year. He likes to make all the decisions. But you hire good people to make decisions for you because you cannot do it all. I think that'll be his biggest issue. And let's see how the offense develops for Colin Klein this year. That was a big hire, interesting hire. Kind of came down to Mike Denbrock. But again, I think this will be the most weapons that Colin Klein has had in his entire career. So next year, again, a lot of big years for a lot of these coaches in the SEC coming up. I think Elko at 9, though.
I'll jump the gun. I'd say Billy Napier, number 9. Here's the reason. He won a conference championship when he was at Louisiana. I get it. G5 Billy. Cool. He won a conference championship. Guess what? A lot of coaches can't say they've done that. He also was able to flip several names over the last few years right before early signing period to come to Gainesville. And the biggest thing for me is that he never lost the buy-in from the culture down in Gainesville this past year. They were losing games in horrendous fashion early in the year. Remember that game against Miami? Like a Miami team that had terrible defense? Yeah, they got blown out. Remember the Texas A&M game? They had more rushing yards in the first half than Florida had the entire game. And there were fans that were in the stands booing him whenever he appeared on the television screen. Like, it was that bad. But they never lost the locker room. You always watch as this team came together. And then you go back to that world's largest outdoor cocktail party where DJ Lagway's hurt, after Graham Mertz is hurt. And the team is still playing like their hair is on fire. That says something to me. That says that you're the right guy for the job. You just don't have the right ingredients right now. Well, he did a good job of portaling in the right players this offseason. I think that he's healthier at the wide receiver spot with Trey Wilson back. Love the addition of Dallas Wilson, the 5-star that committed to Oregon. Think that you're going to have a stable run game. It's a veteran offensive line. You've made some moves, I think, on the better side defensively to put yourself in a good position. You've made some differences over the last few years to where I think 8-4 with your schedule, compared to what most coaches are going to go through next year, that's like a 10-win season in the eyes of what the scheduling says. And so when you get the buy-in from the culture, when you find a way to get your quarterback to stay around and believe I'm the right coach for you, and you're able to bring in a top 10 recruiting class after the season that you had, knowing what's waiting for you in store, I give you your flowers. I think you deserve a little bit more praise than people are giving you. So I got Billy Napier at 9. I'm a little higher on him, and I'm okay with that.
8, I'm going to go Shane Beamer. Again, I was low on the Gamecocks coming into the season. I had major question mark at quarterback. And what did you say?
Shame on you. Shame on you, Shumate.
No, I mean, again, I think he does fit the South Carolina fan base well. Again, both Shane's got an edge, a chip on his shoulder. I think it's kind of what makes him tick, like it or not, right, wrong, or indifferent. It's what makes him tick, and I think it's what makes him motivate the team. Also think the South Carolina fan base a little bit like that, chip on their shoulder, want to be told how good they are. I think it's a perfect marriage. I kind of accepted that over the last year. I didn't know if he'd be long-term this year. Again, I think the Gamecocks are going to go back down to closer to 6-7 this year. 6-7 wins, not overall record, just 6-7 wins. But again, I think that's what you're going to get at South Carolina. 6-7. Every now and then you get maybe a 9 or 10 win. I think Shane Beamer is in a very comfortable spot, a place that fits him well. I would encourage him not to leave because I don't think the Gamecock fans want to see him leave anytime soon. Just got a contract extension from the new AD as well. So I think Shane Beamer locked in. You could maybe argue him a little higher, but I don't think much higher compared to what some of these other guys have done. But again, Shane Beamer, I would have had definitely lower heading into this past season, but definitely moved up for me. But coming in at 8.
Cool. I will argue that he is higher because if I have at 8 Eli Drinkowitz, and I get it. These are like some names that I think like all could jump somewhere into that 6-5 range by this time next year. For starters, back-to-back double-digit win seasons. That means something to me. Like everyone looks at Mizzou as the redheaded stepchild that doesn't belong in the SEC because it snows in November. Like, I get it. The dude finds a way to retain talent. He kept Luther Burden in the building. That was huge. You did get a win over the eventual national champions. Whether or not we want to say they were at full capacity, they still beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. They also are one of a handful of teams that won their bowl game against a Big Ten team. South Carolina didn't do it. Alabama didn't do it. Guess who did do it? Eli Drinkowitz and the Mizzou Tigers. They beat to their own drum. And you know what? The type of recruits that they bring in, the type of transfers that they bring in are also a bit different. Their star running back this year is going to come from Louisiana Monroe. But Ahmad Hardy put up over 1,300 rushing yards last year. Guess what? First phone call to that? Hey, it's Eli Drinkowitz. Come on into Como and be the force of the Tigers' backfield. We're going to make sure that you are roaring your way to an all-SEC level caliber season. Guess what? Kevin Coleman, he was able to portal on in. Bo Pabula, I believe in him. He's retaining talent. They're getting better in the transfer portal. Their recruiting rankings have gone up every single year underneath Eli Drinkowitz. And at this point, the only question that I have left is, can he do it with another relaxed schedule? They don't leave Farote Field until October 18th. Like, if you can go 5-1 in that stretch, get a win over Alabama or South Carolina, you are doing such a good job. And I got to believe right now that Eli Drinkowitz is the long-term dude. I don't think he's leaving anytime soon. I think he's very comfortable where he is. I'm a lot like you when it comes to Shane Beamer. Don't go anywhere else. Stay in Como. You're doing a good job.
Yeah, I got 7 Drink as well, so I'm not going to add much more. But I think Drink up until last year, the 2023 season, that was his first winning season at Missouri. That's wild to say. Just after last season, the 2023 season was his first winning season at Missouri. Granted, his first year was the 2020 COVID year. Drink has definitely made the program better and better overall. I do think this is a big year for him, though. He could be moving. I don't think he can move much higher, in my opinion. He could definitely drop a lot after this year, though, because I want to see the sustainability after losing Brady and them. I want to see the sustainability. I mean, you're right. He brought in he kept Luther Burden, but his next quarterback will be like, hey, was that just kind of you? I mean, he wasn't even that high on Brady Cook coming into it. So it's like it kind of just happened for him and Kirby Moore. So I'm interested to see how Trula does as well coming over Penn State. But no, Eli Drinkowitz at 7 I think is fine, especially after these last 2 years.
7, Shane Beamer. And I won't go that much higher because if he hasn't been to the college football playoff, everyone else has double-digit win seasons or they've been to the dozen dance. Here's the thing, Dave, he's hit the over 3 of his 4 years in win totals. That's got to mean something. Year 1, he had a graduate assistant start games for him, and he was able to get a couple of big-time wins. Year 2 is Spencer Rattler. They not only knocked out Tennessee, but they also knocked Clemson out of the college football playoff race. Like, Shane Beamer is the ultimate spoiler. Like, if your team is getting really hot, he is Baba Yaga, boogeyman in the night, about ready to pop the balloon on all of your hopes and dreams. That is Shane Beamer. Did it this past year. Beat Clemson, beat Texas A&M, should have probably beaten LSU if the Nicky Manwari interception decides to count. He was able to get his team to play underneath his type of persona. And I agree with you. Why go anywhere else where you're at is really good. South Carolina, in my opinion, should be a team that every single year competes for 8 wins. Every 3 or 4 years competes for 10 and 11 wins. Makes the college football playoff because if they have a culture and an identity, they have an atmosphere, and they have a fan base that is willing to put its money where its mouth is. They got the quarterback. I like the additions that they brought in via the portal. They're not big-time names, but you talk to people in the industry, they fit the Shane Beamer kind of Clayton White culture that they've established the last few years. I like Mike Shula working with a guy like in the Norris Sellers just because of his background with mobile quarterbacks. I'm not ready to go ahead and say that Shane Beamer is a top 5 head coach in in the SEC. What I will say is, much like you, he is the biggest riser for me. And I think that the best is still ahead for him out in Columbia.
Bear calling top 5 potentially for the Beam team.
I'm going to put my money on where my mouth is. I am.
I mean, maybe if they go match 9 wins again, though. I mean, Heupel, I would still put. I still have Heupel unless Beamer goes to a playoff. At least Heupel has a playoff, and then go
Heupel at 6, right?
Number 6. I'm going Josh Heupel. Heupel, give him credit. I think he's taken the Tennessee program back to kind of where they're accustomed to being, but it's time to go take that next step. And it's wild to say from a playoff perspective. I mean, they did make it from a playoff perspective, but again, Josh Heupel on the road, great teams go win on the road. That's that next step. You have to go beat other good teams on the road to become a premier team in this. I mean, you've seen it. Texas, Alabama, Georgia have all done it. LSU throughout the years have done it. Tennessee has not done that, and that is his next big step to me. That is what's concerned. They have been no-shows over the past really 3 years at times in Tuscaloosa, in Gainesville, in Athens, in games in Columbus. I mean, again, not easy places to play, not places people go win often. But when Tennessee's comparing themselves to teams like Alabama and Georgia, as they should, and Florida, as they should, you have to start winning those type of games. I think everybody's already there. Tennessee's in that top group of teams in the SEC right now, but they're not on that elite level yet because they haven't done elite things. I think Heupel's been figured out a little bit offensively. Nico didn't improve throughout the year. That has me a little concerned. Again, not long-term for Josh Heupel. I think he's got a high floor, 8 wins each year, but from a national title perspective, he's got to get it going. Competing for an SEC perspective, he's got to get it going, and it all starts with showing up on the road. And it starts with Nico improving next year. So I got Josh Heupel at 6.
Heupel's at 6 for me, but let me ask you, do you know the last time that Tennessee has had a coach that had 2 10-win seasons during his tenure in Knoxville? You know?
Philip
Fulmer.
Yeah.
So we have gone through a laundry list of coaches who have not been able to get to 10 wins at a program that puts in the money, that puts into the resources, that also has one of the best fan bases in college football. I don't care about Vol's Twitter. Vol's Twitter is exactly what makes college football a blessing. It's what makes the sport so unique. It's what makes the sport on the same level when people are like, oh, the Premier League is different. Go to a college football game in the SEC on a Saturday afternoon, and I promise you, that same hostility you feel when you're against Liverpool and Manchester, you'll feel that in Knoxville and Tuscaloosa. I promise you. He's got 10 wins. He's had the number 1 scoring offense 1 year. He's also had the number 1 passing attack in multiple seasons. He's also been one of the most complete coaches when his offense is humming. My question is, can we get back to that offense on the same vicinity that it was back in 2022 with Hendon Hooker? They can run the football extremely well. I love what they've done over the last few years with Jalen Wright, with Dylan Sampson. I thought Dylan Sampson was a snub for the Doak Walker Award. Absolutely should have at least been a finalist that year. I think with Nico, you knew that this wasn't the year he was supposed to take that step forward. But I do wonder, can you get to that next level? David, you seen their schedule? Like they honestly, if Nico takes that next step forward, should be right back in the college.
Their schedule since Heupel's been there has not been difficult. It hasn't. I mean, he did, huh?
They should be in the playoff next year.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Their schedule really hasn't been that difficult since he's been there. And I think it's to the point a little bit. They probably miss Alex Golesh a little bit. You talked about what has changed since 2022. It's Hendon Hooker and Alex Golesh. You can blame Joe Milton all you want, but I mean, again, Nico Iamaleava didn't look great this year either. I mean,
I blame the wide receivers personally, but still,
it's a group of it's everybody. I mean, again, it's that whole side of the football. It's just been inconsistent, especially when you take a look. Again, 2 things can be true at once. Josh Heupel has done a really good job getting Tennessee back to the level, but now let's go take that next step, man. It's time to go do that. It's year 5 coming up. And you haven't ever really won a big road game. And before people come in 2022 LSU, when everything went wrong against LSU from the start at 11 a.m. kickoff. I need a little more than that. But Bear, you're up next, right? We're done.
You're number 5.
Number 5, I'm gonna go. Speaking of LSU, I'm gonna go Brian Kelly. And again, you can make an argument if you want to high pull Brian Kelly over him or Lane Kiffin. I can listen to that. I think there's some fair points.
They're in the same tier at this point, I would say.
Yeah, you're splitting hairs. But I think BK, going back to what he did at Notre Dame, you got to give him credit for that. I think he did get off to a rough start, overestimated or underestimated the job at LSU, just thinking you walk in and it's just a cesspool of talent from that perspective. Yes, it can be that if you set yourself up right. Again, the 3 head coaches prior to him all won national titles: Nick Saban, Les Miles, Ed Orgeron, and most people consider 2 out of those 3 guys complete goons. So, I mean, it goes to show you anybody can win a national championship potentially at LSU. I think he, like I said, underestimated that, but now they've got the right people in the right spots with Austin Thomas running the entire roster. So I think they're in the right spots. He got Blake Baker back in. I think they're good now. I think you saw a little bit of the relapse last year because of what they didn't do in the first 2 years recruiting wise. But I think they got the train back on the tracks. I do think LSU is about to start investing a lot of money into their roster. Do not be surprised with them. I like the trajectory of the Tigers, and that was coming from somebody who was not high on LSU coming in just because I knew what that defensive side of the football looked like. But I think BK, factor in what he did at LSU or what he's done so far at LSU, what he did at Notre Dame. I think he's a top 5 coach in the league right now.
Every single coach that I'm about to name is a top 10 coach on my list right now. And by the way, Josh Heupel, he's number 12. So right on the outside looking in of top 10 coaches in college football. Number 5 is Lane Kiffin. You know what Lane Kiffin has that Josh Heupel doesn't? That almost every coach also doesn't have at their program? The most wins in a single season. We've never seen Ole Miss have an 11-win season until he arrived. Last year, get a win over Penn State in the Peach Bowl. They close out the year. The buy-in that this team had in terms of the transfer portal, in terms of how the recruiting has gone up and how they've retained talent on the investments in the NIL collective is second to none. And it's why a lot of people, including yours truly, had Ole Miss not only being a good team to make the college football playoff, I had them going to Atlanta this past season because of what they had returning. That's a big deal. Lane Kiffin convincing players Ole Miss is not only the right place for you, this is the right offense for you. There's a proof of concept that when you transfer on in, you're going to get a draftable grade leaving this program in Oxford. But unfortunately, he shot himself in the foot too many times last year, and that knocked him down a little bit. You lost to a Kentucky team that never found its way back to Lexington after biting a detour in Oxford. You lost to an LSU team that had questionable defensive play, and all you needed was a 4th down stop. You lost to a Florida team because of your quarterback that I believed was good enough to win a Heisman Trophy through 3 interceptions in the 4th quarter. The peak version of Ole Miss was good enough to go on a run through the college football playoff and be the most dangerous team in the postseason. The bad version went 9-3 during the regular season. And that stems from coaching. That stems from decision-making. And the little things, the meticulous details, like having a 345-pound defensive tackle run to the outside instead of up the middle on a 4th and 1 is beyond me. It's perplexing. That's coaching decisions where Lane Kiffin shot himself in the foot. But I still believe he's a top 10 coach in college football. And it's a matter of it's a matter of when, not if, Ole Miss makes the college football playoff underneath him. I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon either. I think he is locked in Oxford. If he's not going back to the NFL, I don't think he takes another job. I personally believe that.
I'm going to go Lane at 4 too, not to harp on a little bit more because we got a couple other segments to get to, but I'm going to go Lane Kiffin at 4. I kind of like him in today's college football, the very transactional era of college football. I think he kind of fits it. I think he's a phenomenal offensive play caller. Yeah, again, guys, I think everyone outside of one guy on this list has holes you can poke through. Is he the most organized? No. Is he the best culture guy? No, but I think he'd probably tell you that. But I think in today's model, what he's done at Ole Miss, and again, Ole Miss has supported him. He's supported Ole Miss. So I think it's a perfect marriage. Again, I'm a little bit more on board as time goes on, him staying there, like we mentioned, with Drink and Beamer. So, I mean, I think Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss is a really good fit right now. I really do. Like, I would hate for the guy to try to even go back. I don't think this would happen, but just hypothetically, the SC job, if Lincoln Riley were to leave. I personally like Lane Kiffin. That's what added into this ranking here. Phenomenal play caller. Again, would I hire him at other certain schools? No. But I think right now, with what Ole Miss is doing, how much they've invested in him, it's a perfect marriage right now. I think he's 4 right now.
4 for me is Brian Kelly. Get over it. I'm a Brian Kelly apologist. I'm not going to be sorry about it. I will defend Brian Kelly because if you want to know why, he's one of the winningest coaches in in college football history. 72% win rate. He's won everywhere he's been, from Grand Valley State to Cincinnati to Notre Dame to LSU. People want to forget that when he arrived at LSU, half the roster was depleted via the portal. And that team went to the SEC championship and beat Nick Saban in overtime. He did that. And you know what? Just like Davis brought up, he didn't understand the politics that went into that job, because a lot of people don't understand the politics that went into that job. But he's learned along the way. Dave, do you know when you look at his coaching staff, nearly every single person has ties to the state of Louisiana now, with the hires of Lance Gidry and Alex Atkins? Do you think that that's somebody who doesn't understand what it means to be at a program like LSU, what the expectations are, what the actual belief should be? You return talent at quarterback in Garrett Nussmeier. I like what you have brought in with Michael Van Buren as a contingency plan. I like what you've brought in terms of newcomers on the offensive line. I like that you've been willing to spend money to bring in the right defensive coaches like Blake Baker, like Corey Raidman, like Bo Davis. I like that you've finally taken that money that was utilized towards the NIL fund for this 2025 class. Bryce Underwood stays home. You say, okay, let's spend it on a bunch of players to fix our defensive front. It's a better defensive unit going into year 2 underneath Blake Baker. I think it's a manageable schedule. I do believe that when you look at LSU, the expectation should be 10 wins. I'm not ready to put them there. I think it's foolish to put LSU there, because if we've watched them win games that they shouldn't, and we've watched them lose games that they should have never been in jeopardy of. You got to win in Clemson this year. You have got to be able to start the season off on the right note. But still, you've won everywhere. Brian Kelly has been to a national championship. He has been to a college football playoff. People don't like him, and that's fine. But your biggest argument right now for Brian Kelly being anywhere other than the top 5 is he's a meanie. I don't think he's a good dude. Cool. He's a good coach, and he proves it almost every single year. 10 wins in his first 2 seasons. People forget he's the second fastest coach in program history to get to 20 wins at LSU.
I'm going to go number 3, Kalen DeBoer. Some may call that crazy. But I think people underestimated how there's adjustments the first year in a situation like that. You don't ever take over for the GOAT. Again, a term I think it's thrown around way too easily, way too loosely these days. But obviously, I think it's unanimous. Nick Saban is the greatest coach of all time in modern college football for sure. It's just an adjustment period. Again, culture from Nick Saban is totally different from Kalen DeBoer. Doesn't mean one's right. Doesn't mean one's wrong. It's just there's a certain way. I mean, again, Nick Saban probably would have blown the whole thing up from the get-go, and that may have accounted for a couple more losses in his first year. If we're talking about first year, I mean, look at Nick Saban's first year, 7-6. But I think sometimes, like, it's going back to the Ray Perkins days. Alabama fans can remember when Ray Perkins took over for Bear Bryant. He took down the tower that Bear Bryant used to stay in. That used to piss people off. But at some point, it's got to be your program. Nick Saban knows that. I think we underestimated that. I think this year is going to be a little different. I think we underestimated how hard it was going to be to take over for Nick Saban. Kalen DeBoer had a much tougher job than I think we all were kind of giving it credit for. He's had much success at Washington. Phenomenal record against Steve Sarkisian, Dan Lanning. Had some big wins this year, just consistency across the board. That's the biggest challenge to him. Alabama fans aren't used to losing teams that are less talented than them in teams like Vanderbilt and Oklahoma. That can't happen. Nick Saban only lost to one non-top 25 team 1 year. That was A&M in 21. But again, not comparing him to Nick Saban. Kalen DeBoer is his own coach, some special things at Washington. I think next year is going to be better for the Tide, and I think we totally underestimated, now hindsight 2020, what he had to endure that first year. And again, it's not always just I took over a bad situation. This is rare. That's a very hard situation to go take on, where you're trying to go take over a team that just left the college football playoffs and had 17 years of really dominant. So I think I got Kalen DeBoer here at 3.
He has an 81.2% win percentage throughout his college football head coaching career. He took a Washington team that had Jimmy Lake as his head coach to back-to-back 11-win seasons. On top of that, he has his offensive coordinator that he wanted to hire from the get-go, Ryan Grubb, in the building. When you have somebody that you trust like that level, that does wonders for you just to worry about calling plays or bringing in the right talent. Anybody who says he can't recruit in the SEC, well, year 1, he had a number 3 recruiting class. Year 2, he has the number 3 recruiting class in the country. He's portaled in the right players. He's built an identity that's completely different than Nick Saban, which a lot of people don't like, but sometimes change is necessary. Alabama was not the same Alabama since 2020. They were showing signs of regression well before Kalen DeBoer arrived. And he also has proven time and time again that with the right quarterback at the helm, not only is my offense dynamic, it's explosive. We punch out future NFL Sunday talent at wide receiver. Oh, and I've also coached the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line, so I got that underneath my belt too. It was year one. One season does not define your career for any of these coaches. Doesn't define Brent Venables, doesn't define Hugh Freeze, doesn't define Kalen DeBoer. He has a winning percentage in the 80s. He's been to a national championship. He's had multiple double-digit win seasons, and at the Division III level, he's won a national championship. So the guy knows what it takes to win. He's easily number 3. No questions asked.
Number 2, Steve Sarkisian. I like Sark manages the whole program similar to what Kirby does. Again, went to the Nick Saban School of Coaching. Sark's on the right path there. Again, I think he's got his hands in the right bucket there. Maybe he could have made a little bit better support staff hires. Again, that's just one man's opinion. But I think overall, his hands are touching the NIL, the roster management, the salary cap stuff, the $20 million revenue sharing is coming. He's going to have his hands all over that, just like Kirby Smart does. A lot of coaches don't like to be involved in that. If I was a head coach, I would want to be a little bit more involved than a lot of these other guys are. Sark, phenomenal offensive coordinator. He's hired some other great on-field coaches. I mean, he's had the most success of anyone else in the league outside of Kirby Smart. I think just his biggest hole, again, and he's kind of what Kirby was early in his career. Against a guy like Kirby Smart, gets a little tight in these big games like Kirby did against Nick for a while until he got that monkey off his back in 2021 in the national title game. I think Sark's a little bit at that point. Again, it had the big win in Tuscaloosa. A little bit, you hate to say a playoff performance is disappointing, but again, I think against the upper tiers, it's kind of, hey, let's go take that next step. But again, I think it's no discussion. Sark's number 2 here.
2 college football playoff appearances. First year in the SEC, goes to the conference championship. First year with the SEC logo, gets the number 1 recruiting class in the country. What more do you want to say? Like, the dude knows what he's doing. And guess what? The best thing is he understands what are the necessities to win in the SEC. Offensive and defensive line play. What has Texas had? One of the last 2 years. One of the best offensive lines, one of the best defensive lines in the country. He understands that part. It's a matter of when, not if, Texas plays for a national championship underneath Steve Sarkisian. Now, do we have to go ahead and say that Arch Manning has to do X, Y, and Z for Steve Sarkisian to meet expectations? No, that's foolish. But from a standpoint of recruiting, retaining talent, bringing in the right talent, the wins, the signature wins, Steve Sarkisian has all of them. And you know what? You may go ahead and say, well, the playoff performances are a little bit underwhelming. He lost to Kalen DeBoer, a better and Ryan Day. Those are his playoff losses. National champion runner-up, national champion. I think you can live with that at the end of the day. I truly do think that most people can understand that is fine for what we've done year 1 in the SEC. But number 1, we both have the same answer, so we don't waste a lot of time. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, Kirby Smart's the number 1 hands-on. I don't even think I don't even know if you could debate it, honestly, without being laughed out of the building. So, I mean, it's Kirby Smart. Just keep rebuilding again. Will he go in the Nick Saban run? I don't think so. I think the sport's a little harder than you can't collect the depth that they used to, and that's what he complains about. You talk to people within that program, is just the lack of the ability to build the depth. But again, done a phenomenal job at Georgia so far. Again, the best program in the country right now, so it's definitely Kirby Smart.
Even though you can say he's got to beat the Alabama curse about winning during the regular season, he's beaten them in the national championship, the biggest game of the year. So it's like, yeah, he has the Alabama monkey on his back. He's gotten 1 win against them. He still has the biggest win, like the one that claims you are the best in college football. He's done more with less tier quarterbacks than anybody else in the sport. Oh, and by the way, he also has the protege marker of a top 10 coach that currently is on the radar, maybe even to some a top 5 coach in Dan Lanning that learned underneath him. So he has a number 1 recruiting class. He has multiple national championships. He's the only coach in the last 5 years to win multiple titles. It's number 1, clear as day. He's the number 1 coach in college football, and more importantly, he's the number 1 coach in the SEC. But do you agree with Dave's list? Do you agree with my list? Real quickly, Dave, let's run through it. For number 16, we both have Jeff Levy. For number 15, we both have Sam Pittman. Number 14, I have Clark Lee. Number 13, Hugh Freeze. Number 12, Brent Venables. Number 11, Mark Stoops. Number 10, Mike Elko. Number 9, Billy Napier. Number 8, Eli Drinkwitz. Number 7, Shane Beamer. Number 6, Josh Heupel. Number 5, Lane Kiffin. Number 4, Brian Kelly. 3, Kalen DeBoer. 2, Steve Sarkisian. Number 1, Kirby Smart.
Yeah. So, I mean, we had the same thing. I had Venables 14, Freeze 13, Stoops 12, Billy Napier 11, Clark Lee 10, Mike Elko 9, Shane Beamer 8, Eli Drinkwitz 7, Josh Heupel 6, Brian Kelly 5, Lane Kiffin 4, Kalen DeBoer 3, Steve Sarkisian 2, and Kirby Smart 1.
Make it so let us know in the comment section who had the better list, but also make sure that when you go to the comment section, you also hit the like button, the ring notification. That way you don't miss out on the content. We got over 500 people watching right now. All it takes is a quick thumbs up on the video, and just make sure that you also hit subscribe. It's free. Lets us know what you guys like. Lets us know what type of content that we need to produce moving forward, so that way you continue to stick around for the Overtime Drive every single week. And the Overtime Drive is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just beginning at FanDuel, the #1 sportsbook in America, because FanDuel is your home for NBA live betting. Even if you miss the first few minutes of a game or want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can do so with your picks from the first whistle to the final buzzer. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into same-game parlays for a shot at a bigger payout. However you want to play, now is the perfect time to join. And if you haven't joined yet, new customers at FanDuel get started with the $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So lay down $5, win that bet, go ahead and get your next bet, and get $150 in the process. Just visit FanDuel.com/SECU to join today. That's FanDuel.com/SECU to join today for $150 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet. Make everything more fun with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Disclaimer: must be 21 plus and present in select states for Kansas and affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus in DC. First real online wager money only. $5 first deposit is required. Bonus issued with non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit mdgamblinghelpma.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. All right, Dave, let's go ahead and talk about college football versus college basketball. National championship. The SEC hasn't won it in what now, 2 years? There's speculation that people think that it's going to be a third year with the Big 10 or the Big 12 or the ACC. It's not going to be the SEC, which means college basketball, which is having an epic year, like one of the best years we've ever seen in the sport for a conference, might have an opportunity to win a national championship. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to make our cases why the SEC is going to win a national championship in football first or basketball first. I'm pro football. You're pro basketball. You have the floor, my friend.
Yeah, I think it's really just. I think it's going to be this year. That's why. I mean, if you gave me Auburn, Alabama, and Florida on the hardwood this year versus the field, I would take that. I know it's 3 compared to the other 65 teams that would be in the tournament at that point. But I feel like, again, we always say the national championship or the field, or these group of teams are the field. It's like, how many teams can really compete for a national title in basketball? I think it's those 3, Duke, and I think probably Houston, and you maybe can throw Iowa State in there. And that's 3 of those teams I think can truly win the national title, not just get to the Final Four. That's 3 potential 1 seeds. I don't think we get 3 1 seeds, but I do think Florida has a real shot to win the national title. I think Alabama's ceiling's that, and certainly Auburn's got the highest floor, massive gap. But then I just think in football right now, I don't feel great about it next year. Again, it's early, Bear. We're not even in spring ball yet, but I just don't think – I think there's going to be a lot of young defenses in this league. I think Alabama probably going into the year as the best defense. Georgia's going to be really young. They're breaking in another quarterback with Gunnar Stockton. I just don't think next year is the SEC either. I hope I'm wrong. I just think the SEC is about to, you mentioned, potentially going on a third year running. SEC basketball, too early to tell for next year because you're building a roster year to year much more than you even are in college football. But I think this year, I do think we end the streak. I mean, last time the SEC won a national championship in basketball, 2012, Kentucky. Before that, Florida, 05, 06. Then before that, it was Arkansas in the early 90s. So we haven't had a lot of teams, especially outside of Kentucky, win national championships in basketball. I think this year will be it. Now, obviously, I don't think Kentucky will be one of those teams. I'm going to go basketball just this year. I think it's got to be this year. If it wasn't this year, Bear, I may go football, but that's how confident I am in the SEC this year in basketball. And I just think football next year, I don't think is going to do it as we stand right now. So I'm going to lean basketball right now.
Here's why I counter-argue basketball. They're having such an epic year right now. Like, how many teams are ranked inside the top 25? 8, 9 right now in basketball. A 11, 12, 13 are expected to make the tournament if like the season were to end today, according to Joe Lunardi. It's like an incredible year. It never happens in the incredible year, in my opinion. It always happens in the year where you least expect it, where there's one dominant team and then everybody else just kind of falls in line, where you're like, nope, nobody is beating this roster. Nobody was beating Kentucky in 2012. Nobody was beating Florida in 2005. Those rosters were on their own level. Like, beating those teams felt like it was David versus Goliath, in my opinion. Where with these teams, a number 5 Tennessee can lose to a number 15 Missouri. A number 4 Alabama can lose to a number 24 Ole Miss. Because if it's happened, you can see Kentucky drop a game, but yet somehow get a signature win against a top 5 team. That's what I have my questions with. That eventually we're going to see all these teams play against each other. They're going to get tired. They're not going to go on that epic run. And then we may see 1 or 2 teams make it to the Elite 8. But a lot of us are predicting it should be closer to 6 or 7 because that's what the numbers said. Look at how many teams are ranked inside the top 10 every single week. With Tennessee, with Alabama, Mississippi State's in the top 15, Missouri's flirted with the top 15, Kentucky's flirted with the top 10. You got Auburn at number 1 with the highest floor. So it's like, I have this theory that in a year where it's so special in the regular season, it's not going to happen, and it's least expected.
Barry, here you go. Here's a question for you. How many teams do you think in the SEC as we stand today? Again, we got a whole other portal cycle of spring ball, but on February 24th, can win the national championship in football going into the year next year? You think they can win the whole thing, not just a couple of games?
At their peak, I would say guaranteed 4 with the potential of 5. Number 1, Georgia. It's Georgia. Number 2, Texas. If Arch Manning is as advertised, they can win the national championship. Number 3 is LSU. Let me explain. They have the veteran quarterback. Alabama's breaking in a new quarterback. Ole Miss is breaking in a new quarterback. Florida is finally giving the reins to DJ Lagway. What are we going to see from the Norris Sellers and Nico Iamaleava next year? I think their schedule is very manageable outside of the game against Clemson. They have Garrett Nussmeier. They have more offensive pieces to count. They have a stable defense now. They should be a 10-win team. At their peak, if Garrett Nussmeier is as advertised, they should be able to win a national championship. Their defense has to deliver. Their offensive line has to deliver, but they can win it. Number 4 is Alabama. I think the addition of Ryan Grubb was the biggest addition for Alabama this offseason because he has worked with offensive lines. He has worked with the quarterbacks. He has worked with every position underneath Kalen DeBoer. And if DeBoer has to leave to go land a 5-star recruit, he can run practice. He can do everything that's necessary. I love the addition of Ryan Grubb. And then number 5 for me, honestly, I think it's scary, but humor me. Ole Miss in a year where nobody expects them to do anything, why couldn't they? And the same thing goes for Tennessee. What if Nico Iamaleava hits that next stride?
But you think they can win it all, though?
Yeah.
Well, okay. Not just win a couple games in the playoffs.
What if the offensive line is better next year? And they still have they lost multiple pieces defensively. They did, but they still have they still have Jamon McCoy. They still have Boo Carter. They still have multiple stars on that defensive line. And they also, I think, can have a better wide receiver play with Mike Matthews and Chris Brazzell.
I just don't know if Heupel can go win that many kind of caliber games in a row to go win it. And I know you're not saying they will. You just think they're that caliber. That's why I'm like, truly, who could win it all? I don't know if Georgia will next year because I'm like, how young they are defensively, breaking in a quarterback. I mean, you go back historically, that doesn't happen. So I don't know if they can make the playoffs, certainly. They can maybe win the SEC again. I just think winning it all, I mean, I like Alabama to win it all for them just because what they got coming back on defense. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm going to probably say 3 teams can win it all next year. And I don't feel great about Bama, but I would say Texas, LSU, you're right. Again, I think they'll be better. And I would say Alabama. Right now, Georgia I still think has a lot to show me. Ole Miss still, I don't know if Lane's that guy can go win that many great games, that many like competitive games at that level, that many times in a row to be that consistent, to go win the whole thing. Certainly make it. If you say who can make the playoffs, much bigger list, obviously. But I think truly winning it all, I mean, I usually say every year there's really only 3 to 4 teams. I think 2 to 4 teams that can really truly win the whole thing going into it. And we saw it. I think Ohio State was certainly one of those teams going into the year. I mean, I made a bet going into the year, folks. Georgia and Ohio State versus the field. Middle of the year, I was getting towards the end of the year, I was getting a little concerned, I'll be honest with you. But Ohio State ended up winning the bet for me. And again, I thought those were 2 teams that could legitimately win the whole thing. I just don't think there's that many teams year out that you can go win a couple games. But just like we talked about with the basketball side of things, Yeah, there's a difference between just going to the Final Four and winning it all. I know surface level, we're all like, well, no kidding, dude. No shit, Dave. It's 2 + 2 = 4. But to go win the whole thing's a totally different kind of gear. So I think that's where me and you would agree to disagree a little bit more on that.
I think the big thing when it comes to football right now is that I'm not sure that there is a guaranteed favorite. There isn't. I look at Ohio State. Ohio State, okay, you have the best defensive player returning. You lost your offensive coordinator. You lost your defensive coordinator. You also are losing ample production on both sides of the ball. Notre Dame, I think that you're in a good spot when it comes to returning talent, but the quarterback is the most important player. What do you like in Steve Angeli or what do you like in CJ Carr? What about Penn State? It feels like it's an all-in year. Very much like Ole Miss last year. Do you underachieve this season? So I look at the SEC and I say to myself, well, I didn't think that Tennessee was ready to take that step like they were in 2023. They did. So why am I going to doubt that Nico this year, with a full season of reps underneath his belt, can't get better? Same thing with Florida if they start hitting their stride defensively. Same thing with South Carolina if all their pieces come to play. Missouri has the most workable schedule in the SEC. They don't leave Memorial Stadium until October 18th. Just don't lose to both Alabama and South Carolina, and you stand a shot. And then I look at LSU, I look at Ole Miss, and I look at Alabama and Texas and Georgia. All of them have proven to me that they can get 10 wins, and they have top 5 coaches. And you want me to doubt them. In a year where I feel like the SEC is going to be doubted, it's a year to where I think they can strike. In a year where so much has gone right for the SEC in basketball, I feel like that they're going to come up short. And that we're going to watch as a St. John's or a Baylor or an Iowa State, or as you mentioned, who is the other one in the Big 12? Houston. They end up cutting down the nets in San Antonio. Like that's my personal belief at this point.
Yeah. Again, I'm gonna take the pot. That's just this year so far. The SEC. I'm gonna go SEC in basketball. As wild as that is to say, Bear.
And I'm going to go SEC in football in 2025. But let us know in the comment section down below, what do you think happens first? Is Dave right and basketball cuts down the nets in San Antonio? Or am I right and going to Miami? We will see an SEC team be back on top as it's well-deserved. Like, review, hit subscribe. Make sure that also, real quickly, it takes 2 seconds, you are subscribed to the channel by just going and clicking on that subscribe button. And while you're over there, leave a nice little review. Tell us why you like the show. Tell us what you like about the show and what you hate about the show. I'm promising you the reason why we're doing this is not because we want to make it more expensive for you or that we want to give you ads or publicity. We want to know what works and what doesn't. That way the show continues to flow. Dave's spring games are not flowing right now. In fact, a lot of spring games are getting canceled. Mizzou announced on Monday their spring game. On Sunday, their spring game was canceled. Texas has announced their spring game was canceled. USC has announced it. Ohio State has announced it. Multiple other schools are rumored to announce in the coming weeks that the spring game is getting canceled. So you've worked in player personnel. You've worked for multiple programs. You know the value of a spring game in terms of the internal metrics. Is this a good thing for college football or is this a negative for college football in your opinion?
Probably depends where you're at. Like I saw Clark Lee and Vanderbilt are having a spring game again, trying to promote the program. They have some faces of the program right now there. Again, we got Diego Pavia, one of the more known faces around the sport, being a Commodore coming back again. I think that's key. Kind of let the fans get around that, some fan engagement. I totally agree why Clark Lee would do it. But I also think we're leaning. I was talking to some guys today. We're going to go to that OTA route. Again, I think spring used to be important. Back before you had the unlimited transfers, you knew the roster was in there. Except you were missing a couple of your freshmen that weren't early enrollees. And those 15 practices were massive, getting reps in, building your depth. Now, you have some guys that won't even be there after the spring. So I don't know why you go in and invest much time. You got to do something. I don't think you go all out. Maybe you just do some maybe you do a bunch of glorified walkthroughs, have some shirts, shorts, and you kind of, like I said, you go through your walkthrough, you get your 7-on-7 and stuff in. But again, I think this is where, because of this, you're going to see tackling be an issue in the sport come season. Because again, I used to be the NFL liaison. I always used to ask the NFL guys, the scouts that would be around these programs day in, day out, going, why is tackling so bad in the sport now? And it's pretty simple. If you don't do something, you're never going to get good at it. And that's again, the teams that tackle in practice are the good teams. Again, I know teams are trying to limit injuries, and that's the big thing here. But I think now overall, I think with how it's going, why would you go all out in the spring? Again, it's got to be a little give and take there. You're trying to protect your players, but you're also not trying to go waste reps on guys that are already planning to leave your program in 3 weeks once you're done with spring. So I think in and out. But again, if you're like a team like Vanderbilt, you got to go promote the program. And you have big faces on your team this year. You got to go get them out there. So I totally see why they do it, but I also see why a guy like Sark wouldn't. I know why some people are like, well, you got to get back to the fans and stuff like that. It's like, I get it, but there's other things you can do to supplement that instead of just a spring game. And I think that's why they paid the Texas marketing director big bucks for ideas like that. So overall, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think we saw this coming. Anyone that's been in the sport or been around it saw this coming. I think the best way to go is maybe a 10 OTA type of day in the spring. Again, I don't think anybody's real worried about it. We all kind of saw this coming.
I, from a fan perspective, understand the frustrations because for a lot of fans, especially, and you and I know this at the University of Alabama, games are expensive. Tickets are out the wazoo, even for games against Charleston Southern or Chattanooga or Coastal Carolina when they were an FCS program. Tickets were massively expensive, but the spring game was an opportunity for fans to be able to come on in and see what their team could expect going into the year. How you could feel about what are some areas to where you could have excitement watching the game at home. And it was that way at Texas. And it was that way at Auburn, and it is that way at LSU, and it is that way at Georgia. But I also understand that in this new era of college football, especially where the transfer portal, there are 2 windows, and there's the spring window, you're doing 2 things. Number one, you're protecting your roster from being riddled by players to come on in and try and be stolen that are sitting on the bench who may have already decided to enter the transfer portal, but now it's going to up their NIL deal. The other thing is it's going to give you an opportunity to kind of figure out where are your weaknesses in the roster to where you can go poach teams that are currently having their spring games. Because let's just call a spade, Dave. I don't think Texas is done. I don't think Texas is far from done with its roster. They didn't bring in enough via the portal this offseason to where I feel like they're comfortable going into next year, guaranteeing a spot in the college football playoff. They're in a good spot when it comes to what their roster is, but they want to be an elite level. They want to be at that level to where they feel like that they are, no questions asked, guaranteeing their spot. A team like Vanderbilt, them not having a spring game, maybe does wonders of retaining talent that may get scalped out by Georgia, by Alabama, by Texas, because if they're willing to throw a little bit more NIL money their way, but they also need the spring game. So I agree with you in the sense of why the spring game is going away as a positive. But as a fan perspective, to a lot of places that don't get to go experience the atmosphere of game days, get to experience the moments of what is Saturday afternoon in Tuscaloosa or Auburn or Baton Rouge because they can't make the trip out there. A game like that is the only time that they're going to experience that every single season and have that pride in the community of what is their favorite sport. So you got to find a way to, I think, regroup it. You know, when Nick Saban was there, they always had that fan day in
running in the gumps, baby.
But like they always have that fan day in the spring, in the summer, like in August, where where every single player would get to meet with the fans. They'd sign autographs, they'd take pictures. Like you gotta do something like that to be able to recoup it. But I understand the reasoning with multiple people that currently are frustrated with the spring game going away. What's the reasoning behind it? Especially for fans that go ahead and put their blood, sweat, and tears and are loyalists to a T, even in down seasons. This is their one time where they get to actually see college football at its finest, and it's being taken away from them because of they're trying to protect the roster.
Yeah, I mean, this would be a crazy era. I get it. Yeah, because we've asked the common 8 to 5 man to pay for a lot of these rosters. So it's like you said, if that guy's donating, which I do think some of those guys do, like they let them into certain things. The guys at these certain collectives, if you donate to certain things, like I think Ole Miss does a phenomenal job taking care of their people who do that. But you're right. For the teams that don't, it is a way for certain people to get into the stadium. But I think it's just kind of the lay of the land right now, man. People are trying to figure out new ways with new rules. People don't know rules. It is what it is. But I see it from both sides. I do see the fan frustration, but I also see the teams like Texas being like, dude, well, we're just going to go practice right and have some massive spring. And again, I think spring games have been dying for a couple of years now anyways. Sure. They've been on life support. But it's like you said, I mean, the main reason, I don't think anyone's out there being like, no, the team gets better at A-Day. Like maybe 5 years ago. But I think now it's kind of
they get better.
This turned it into a complete clown show.
They get better at missing A-Day because of guess what? Their roster is not going to be riddled by losing the third string left tackle to another program. Like, that's what's going to happen at this point because there's not enough film to put on them to where it's like, oh, they're going to offer a massive deal in NIL. Like, honestly, in my opinion, that's a good thing for some schools is that your roster is not going to be riddled when it comes to your backups. Because think about a place like Georgia last year. Georgia felt really good with its starters. Guess we had questions with the second teamers, with the third teamers, when you had to turn to those guys that weren't ready to start, because if you had to go ahead and put them in, because everyone else that you thought was ready decided to leave to go ahead and get paid and start elsewhere. So maybe that does do wonders. I don't hate the fact that spring games are going away, as long as you replace it with something prominent. But I understand the reasoning why spring games are going away. It had been dying. You were seeing fewer and fewer fans attend every single year, but you got to be able to recoup it in some different capacity, because if there are fans that truly look forward to those little events in the spring that bring together the community, and more importantly, bring together college football fans at their purest form that truly just enjoy the sport.
No, you're right. I'm fired up for our last segment here, Bear.
All right, so every single day that we do a show right here on the Overtime Drive, real quickly, if you haven't, follow AYS Sports, because if he already follows this channel, and make sure that you like the video and hit the ring notification, because of not only do I have the best mustache in the SEC, I have the best content in the SEC along with Dave Shumate over here. But every single show, we are going to close with a hypothetical. The hypothetical for this show is the 12-team college football playoff didn't start in 2024. It started in 2014. Any team between those years of 2014 and 2023 that resided in the SEC made the postseason. Dave, who were the three most dangerous rosters that could have made noise and actually punched their ticket to a national championship if given the current status where the format was you had just basically the 8 seed, but you had an easier path to go towards the national championship?
So again, to clarify, any of these teams, I have 3 that from 14 till this past year I could put in. It did not make the 12-team playoff or the
14 to this past year could have, if they made it in, would have been a dangerous threat to go to the national championship.
Dude,
start with number 3, work your way to 1.
Yeah, I didn't really put them in any specific order, but I can do it. Here we go. 2023. This isn't me ranking them in any order, but I'll throw one of these teams out there. 2023 Georgia. I'm gonna go 2023 Georgia again. Their only loss to Alabama in the SEC championship game. You could make an argument they were probably one of the better teams, if not a top 2 team in the sport. Just had one blemish against Alabama. Just a tough year, tough break. Because again, you had a one-loss Texas who just won the Big 12. You had Alabama who just won the SEC and beat you head-to-head. So I don't know how you could have put Georgia in ahead of Alabama. And obviously, you had Washington and Florida State taking care of business then too. So it was just Washington and Michigan take care of business. So it was a tough break, but you easily could have made a case Georgia getting into that. They definitely would have been in a 12-team playoff and probably would have been in the semifinals if they could have got that far too. I think that team was way better than this team they had this year. So a tough break for Georgia there. That's one of the teams that came to mind for me as well.
I want to give an honorable mention because I don't know if they would have made it, but here's the thing. I do believe that this team belonged in the college football playoff to begin with. It was the 2020 Texas A&M roster. They lost one game.
Too.
They were one game away. They lost to they lost to the national championship in week 2. They had a game that was removed off of their schedule against Ole Miss because of the COVID-19 policy. Remember, you had 1 week to be able to reschedule games, and if you couldn't reschedule it, you were done. That was just it. They finished 8-1. They took their frustrations out on North Carolina, and they went 9-1. That team should have been in my opinion, over either Notre Dame, over Clemson, or over Ohio State. They weren't. They're an honorable mention.
And Bear, I didn't put them in because I kind of was trying to put teams in that I thought could have won the thing. And I was like, I mean, A&M could have got in, but I was like, you're right. It's deserving of a mention. But I was like, we already saw them play. I don't think anybody was beating 2020 Alabama that year.
For me, the 2015 Ole Miss Rebels, I think
I have them high. That's my one, spoiler alert.
Okay, so the 2015 Ole Miss Rebels were my number 3. They had a dynamic offense headlined by Chad Kelly with Laquan Treadwell. They beat Alabama that year. On top of that, they also had the
Kimdichie brothers.
Yep, they had the Kimdichie brothers. They had a solid secondary overall. They just lost too many games to where they were knocked out. But honestly, the fact they were able to hold their own against Alabama, I love their quarterback play. Something about Chad Kelly in that rushing attack and his mobility to be able to make second chance opportunities, I thought was a wonder. You put them in the right format, they easily, I think, could have at least made a run to the semifinals and maybe even the national championship.
What they do, but they went to the Sugar Bowl, beat Oklahoma State.
Sugar Bowl, and they beat Oklahoma State.
This was the one they win the West for if it wasn't for 4th and 25 against Arkansas. That was that season. They win the West.
They win the West and they're in the playoff potentially.
And I think they beat Florida And they're probably right. That team's in the playoffs. That's an underrated team people don't really talk about a lot. Next up for me, this is another team. People may call me crazy for this one. Little biased, help build this roster, but the 17 Auburn team to me, if they were healthy down the stretch, that team to me, that was the year Alabama, 2nd and 26, ultimately ended up winning it all after losing to Auburn in the regular season. This was an Auburn team that finished 10-3, again, went 10-2 in the regular season, lost at Clemson early, lost at LSU. They blew a 14-point lead, and then they finished the year beating Georgia 40-17 at Jordan-Hare, beat Alabama 26-14 in the regular season, then lost their rematch to Georgia in the SEC Championship playoff spot on the line in that one. Just they were banged up. Cam Petway, Kerryon Johnson just could not. Gus ran them into the ground. I think if they're healthy with Jarrett Stidham, Darius Slayton, the guys they had on that defense, Marlon Davidson, Derek Brown, big guys, that was a really good defense there. KJ Britt. You had a lot of dudes there play in the NFL now, all that secondary. I think that team's healthy going in against Georgia. I think they could have beat Georgia again, and ultimately Bama went on to win the national championship. I got 17 Auburn, one of the more underrated teams. They could have stayed healthy down the stretch.
20, what is it? Why am I blanking? Which one is it? 2019. Yeah, 2019 Georgia. To me, I thought was a really good team. They won against Cincinnati. Jaden Dang. Was that the Cincinnati year?
Field goal. They beat them in the Peach Bowl in a field goal. Cincinnati should have won that game.
Yeah. What was it? 2019, 2020. The LSU.
It was the 2019 season. Yeah.
Yeah, the LSU season. I personally just believe when you look at that team, they were great offensively. They had 5 All-American defensive players. Really well put together. Again, they just ran out of juice at the last second.
See, I think the 19 Bama team was better than 19 Georgia. I remember that was like when they changed OCs with James Coley because they were not explosive at all with James. Yeah,
but that was the year that Alabama, I think, finished 10-2. And
Tua got hurt. Yeah,
Bama. They went to what's it called? Not the ReliaQuest Bowl.
Yeah, it's Citrus Bowl. They beat Michigan.
Citrus Bowl. So it was a ReliaQuest. Yeah, so it was a ReliaQuest Bowl. But there was just something about that Georgia team. That was a team that I thought was good enough to be able to win it all.
And we already mentioned this team. I go to depth. 2015 Ole Miss was the other one. Honorable mentions. I had 2022 Alabama just missing the playoffs. Some people thought they should have got in over TCU. That was that Bryce Young's last year, Will Anderson's last year, all those guys. That was a really good team. They dropped 2 games, though, to Tennessee and LSU that year. They had their chances. They probably were the 3rd best team in the country that year behind Georgia and Ohio State. But I think they could have beat those teams on a given day as well. And I threw in randomly this year, Bear. I threw in 2024 Ole Miss. I thought we got Ole Miss twice in the season as an honorable mention for Ole Miss this year. I think Ole Miss could have made it to the semis if they would have got an opportunity to get in. I know you were high on them as well. I just wanted to throw them in there as well.
Do me a favor. Put Ole Miss in Penn State's spot. Do they not beat Boise State and SMU?
Yes.
Yes. Put them in. To
be honest, too, Bear. When Notre Dame's quarter, when Riley Leonard went down, Ole Miss would have taken advantage of that against Notre Dame.
Imagine if it was the bracket. What was it? If it was Texas versus Ole Miss, they were the 12 seed. Could they at least have put up points against Texas with that offense? Healthy Trey Harris.
They could have. Yeah.
I don't know if they would have won it, but I think they would have. I agree with you. Depending on the matchup, they would have been. Can I actually switch mine to 2022 Alabama at number 2? I forgot how good that team was. But Bryce Young, Will Anderson. Honestly, Will Anderson should have been a Heisman finalist in 2021 for his efforts. Should have been it in 2022. But for me, number 1, 2023 Georgia. Sorry, they lose 1 game in the conference championship. They handle business. I understand their schedule was relaxed, but still, they found a way to come back and beat Auburn. You nearly beat Alabama and get the comeback in that game. And you're telling me that you drop all the way down to the number 6 seed? Like, I'm not even mad that they were left out of the college football playoff. I am more mad, and I've been mad, and I've gotten in arguments with Dave and Chris about this, that they justifiably said 1-6, and we were all just supposed to be okay with it. Like, you were the number 1 team on a Saturday, and then just to show face, you say, well, Florida State was undefeated, so we're going to put them at number 5. And then they dismantle Florida State, regardless of how many opt-outs that either side had. I thought that team was good enough to win a national championship. Honestly, if you put them in the field as the 4 seed, they may end up beating Michigan. They may end up going to the national championship and beating a team like Washington. That's how good I think about them.
No, I totally agree with you, man. I had them at 3. I think we hit a lot of other teams. I'm trying to think any other teams we'd have missed, Bear, from 14.
2017 Auburn was one that I think that I missed on. I didn't consider them.
Because I'm thinking 14, the SEC, 14, 15, the SEC really weren't like, Florida was winning the East. I mean, that wasn't a phenomenal time. 16, I mean, Auburn.
You know what would have been interesting? Seeing Dan Mullen in 2020 with that Kyle Trask-led team. Would they have made some noise?
Yeah, or they had the old shoe game against LSU. It kind of knocked their momentum off. But you're right. I mean, they took Bama down to the wire. That was a really good team. I agree with you.
That was one that I think maybe at least could have been in the conversation, like from the outside looking in. But let us know in the comment section down below. Who were your 3 teams in the last decade plus that could have made the college football playoff and at least gone on to a run to the semifinals? That does it for us here on the Overtime Drive. First inaugural episode. We'll get the hang of this. We'll move a lot faster. Trying to keep this under an hour. Here's the deal. You need to be following us on the socials at SEC Unfiltered, at Dave Shumate SEC, at Mr. Cole Thompson, because as soon as we get off this channel, we're going to drop the mailbag post. The Thursday show from here on out is the mailbag show. Whatever questions you have about college football, the SEC, our lives, things that we just have going on that we want to talk about, you go to one of those 3 platforms. Give us your questions. Go to our Facebook page. Give us your questions. Go wherever. We're going to pull them up. And if you give us super chats on the Thursday show, you cut the line, you go ahead and we answer your question immediately live on air. But Thursday show, Q&A, mailbag Thursday. We are going to have some content for you, but this is your show. So make sure that you hit subscribe here. Make sure that you follow us over on the socials at Mr. Cole Thompson, at Dave Shumate SEC, at SEC Unfiltered. That way you keep up to date with everything that we're doing. And we will see you again Thursday night, every single week, Monday, Thursday, locked on in. For Dave Shumate, I am Cole Thompson. Just remember, you only live life once. Don't take it too seriously. And also have a beer or two while you're at it. Peace.